All right, so remember you can access the answer key to this test on the website for college readiness at any time. This is SAT number 5. So starting with the no calculator test. So if this was live test taking situation, you would turn the page and you guys at the front of your packet you see there's a formula sheet. You're going to find that formula sheet. While it is nice, not incredibly helpful for the majority of the test, but nice to know you have it. And you're going to immediately turn the page and you're going to hit number 1, which is the beginning of your no calculator math test. So the first, I forget how many, but 16 or so questions, 15 questions, are what are called multiple choice. You've seen them before. But that's not the end of the test. And actually, number 1 is not where you should start. Anyone know where you should start? You should start all the way back, flip, flip, until you get to what's called the gridded response. So, fun fact, quiz for you. Why do you start at gridded response? Well, mathematically, they're not harder. They're harder to guess on is the issue, right? Yeah. So if you end up running out of time, which you very likely will, you don't want these to be the last 3 that you have to magically guess the right answer on. So you're not going to ever read directions on an SAT test when you're taking it live, right? You don't read directions. You should be, they're the same directions they have been for the last like 10 years. So just read them now before you're actually taking the test. But when you grid a gridded response, you have to be really careful about how you're gridding it. They do not accept mixed number fractions like 1 3/4. You can't bubble that in because the computer would read it as 13/4, you know. So they will take a variety of answers, however. That's the good news. The problem is you can't guess and check your way to the right answer usually. So we'd start at number 16, guys. My plan is for this week, because I know some people are like showing up like every single day. So I'm going to do different questions every day. The good news about the SAT test is it's highly predictable as far as what kinds of questions we need to look at. It's also predictable as to like where the nasty ones kind of are going to show up. They typically show up middle end of the test sections. I'm not saying we're at the end and now we're going to be like really sad because everything's going to be hard. That's not what I mean. But the first few are going to be really easy, and then there's some weird ones kind of sprinkled in the middle, and then some weird stuff happens at the end. So, gridded response, you start at number 16. Maria plans to rent a boat. The boat rental costs $60 per hour. Now, you can't use highlighters or pens or anything weird on the test. It's just pencil, which makes me really bummed out because I like highlighters. But you should definitely be looking at some underlining. Guys, these packets are yours to scribble all over, please. Tablets on a little vacation. Here we go. It costs $60 per hour. That seems important. She will also have to pay for water safety course that costs $10. Interesting. Whoops. Maria wants to spend no more than $280 if the boat rental is available for whole number hours. So that's a really important clue. And sometimes we find in our math tests that reading is kind of our downfall, so you do need to slow down. What's the maximum number of hours that Maria can rent the boat? So this is her limit, right? 280. She has to pay for this $10 thing. So get that out of there. So now she's down to 270. And then remember, this was a no calculator test. So usually the first thing kids are like, go reach for their calculator. Yeah, you can't. So 270 divided by 60. You can do like literal long division. You can do kind of fraction breakdown. You could do some estimation because remember, we're only giving whole number answers here. So those of us, with either one of these methods, guys, I might suggest you just knock off the zeros just for a little simplification in your brain. But 6 is going to divide into 27 how many times without going over? 4 or something, all right? Now, do I need to bother finding the something part? No, because she's not going to have enough money to do the next set of hour. So the answer is 4. So you'd bubble in 4. Now, this is where kids panic if they've never seen this. They're like, well, what does that mean? It means literally you put 4 anywhere. Right here, 4. And then don't forget to fill in both parts. The box and the bubble are equally important. If there's a misread on the scanner, they will refer to what you wrote in the boxes to indicate what your true answer was. So I have a lot of kids who do the bubbling and they don't do this for some reason. That's very bad. Don't do that. And some kids just do this and don't do the bubble at all. That is even worse because the machine won't read it. All right. You can put it in any of the boxes. Please don't be the weird kid who writes 0004. I think it will accept it, but I don't really think this is the time to play around with that. Moving on, guys. Number 17. Remember, no calculator. We have an equation, and they want to know the value of p, so basically solve for p. So this is a pretty basic question. However, as an algebra teacher, I'm telling you, there's like 17 places you can screw up. So you need to slow down. We're going to distribute the 2. We know this is an area of error for kids. And then it's kind of a hot mess right now, so we should clean up maybe the left side of the equation first. So combining our p's together, that is a 10p. And then combining these constants together, that becomes a -6. And then some of you were looking at this going, this answer is going to be a fraction. It is. Now, did you notice there's no option to bubble in a negative? They don't give you an option for bubbling in anything negative. So if I was to go through this math and make a boo-boo and get a negative answer, my assumption is what? That I've done something wrong, and then should I just assume that I should write down the positive version of my answer? Probably not. I mean, maybe. Maybe that is just your mistake. I'm going to go ahead and you notice, guys, I'm showing the math. And I know this slows us down, but it also prevents those really dumb mistakes. And usually when I say that, I literally make a dumb mistake. So that's ironic. Did I get it right this time? 6/5. All right, so it will accept 6/5 as an answer, which is the way I would go. The other thing that they would accept is the child who writes this as 1.2, because they thought to do long division on that, or just division, whatever. So for most humans, fractions are easier. If that fraction reduced, or like if the original one was like 10 over, well, that's a stupid example, 10 over 6, for instance, it actually does accept 10 over 6 as an answer. But I would always suggest reducing, because you never know. All right. Oh, notice what I didn't do? I didn't bubble in my bubbles. You bubble in your bubbles if it was your test. I didn't give you guys an answer sheet. If you want an answer sheet to practice with, I have a bunch of extra ones back there. All right, number 18. So this is a system of equations. It says right there, the system of equations. And your methods for solving systems are typically graphing, substitution, and elimination. So everyone loves elimination, but it's not like always the best method. For instance, if one of your formulas is solved for one of the variables, you should use substitution. So this is a great candidate for substitution. Boom. Throw it in there. Now, keep your eye on the prize. They want to know the value for x. Remember, when you solve two variable systems, you're solving for two different unknown things. So keep in mind, I want the x number before I finish this problem. And I think we're going to find it right now. So I have 1/2, and then the quantity 2x plus another 2x. Instead of distributing that 1/2, can we just call that a 4x? There's a few things you can do at this point. For most kids, they just multiply the 1/2 and the 4. Remember, there are fractions in this problem, and no, you can't use your calculator. So this is a 2x equals 21/2. And now we divide by 2, also known as, what's the same thing as dividing by 2? Multiplying by the reciprocal of 1/2, right? That's the same thing. The reason I like to write it like that is because sometimes kids get real frazzled with their fractions. And they're not sure what to do with them, especially if they know they can't use a calculator, and it gets real freaked out. So, I hear some erasing. Oh, I tricked you. I mean, I didn't, because I didn't write it, but 21/4 is the answer. Now, should I go and make this a mixed number? Should I make it, okay, I can do this, 5 and 1/4? No, it will not accept mixed number fraction answers, because 5 and 1/4 would be 51/4, so don't do that. So, I'm just going to do 21/4. Ta-da! Would accept 5.25. You can do decimals, but that would require you to just mystically know how to change fractions to decimals, which probably isn't worth your brain energy, in my opinion. All right, guys, moving on. 19. It's a lot of algebra staring at you there. We have a subtraction of fractions, so go down to the roots of what it means to subtract fractions, guys. How do you subtract fractions? You have to get, like 5th grade style, you have to get common denominators, right? Cool. So my Algebra 2 friends, you haven't seen this yet. And you won't before your test. So we're a bit of a disadvantage. So see if you can figure it out by now. Our common denominator, they want me to figure out the expression is, oh, you know what? Time out. Fancy talk. What it says equivalent to. What mathematical symbol means equivalent to. It's really fancy talk for equals. So they're telling you this. This equals a over x plus 2 squared. So, never mind, I changed my tune. I think we have an equation. All right, my friends who are out of Algebra 2 or in Honors Algebra 2 right now, you've seen these before. When you have a rational equation, now they tell me here x can't be -2. My friends who are thinking about excluded values, because -2 would produce a domain issue, a divide by 0. So that's why they put that clue in there. If they didn't put that clue there, this is actually a bogus problem, and someone could argue and they'd throw the whole test out. So that clue is just for some weird kid who wants to complain. For the rest of us, we're just going to go, okay, how do you solve this? Guys, what would be a least common multiple that'll knock out every single thing in my denominators? So I have an x plus 2 and then another x plus 2 in the same fraction. An x plus 2 and then another double set of x plus 2's. So I think we need x plus 2 squared, which I'm going to write like this. Remember doing this back in Algebra 2, some of my friends who had this? Okay. So when I multiply the LCM into this first fraction, the x plus 2's in the numerator and denominator here are going to knock out, and you're just going to be left with 2x plus 6. Now, this is a really tricky part of this question. You have a -2, and then when I multiply this existing fraction by the LCM, one of the x plus 2's is going to cancel, but not the other one. But notice, there's still a negative in front of that 2. Don't lose that. And then in this last fraction, the x plus 2's will cancel again. So they're gone, and you just have an a. All right, guys, that was actually the hard part of the question. From here on out, it's easy. Yeah, because it's not even a quadratic. Here we go. They want to know the value of a, so let's clean this up. I think some magic stuff is going to happen here, guys. You have 2x plus 6, and then here you have a minus 2x minus 4. Remember, they want you to solve for a. I think we're there, guys. The 2x's will knock out. 6 minus 4 is a 2. A is 2. Now, someone's like, hey, I figured that out a different way. I just started plugging in numbers until I figured it out. And I was like, cool. That's not a good way to use your time. Algebra 2, current Algebra 2 kids, if you saw a question like that and you're like, ooh, that's that thing that she said we haven't learned yet, that's your mental note to just plug in a guess and move on. Come back to it if you have time, but don't spend 10 minutes trying to figure it out the hard way, okay? Remember, we just started the test back here. We have not a lot of time to play with questions. Usually kids want to know how long should I mess with a question before I move on, and that's a different answer for everybody. So if you are in pre-calc right now, you have seen every single thing on this test. You've seen it all. So technically there's not a single question you should be skipping. But if you get to the question and you're like, huh, this one's going to take some thinking, still make a guess and move on if you feel like you need to. You should not be spending more than a few minutes on any one question. And if you find yourself spending a minute on every single question, you are going to honorably run out of time. Because some questions will take you a minute and a half. Some questions will take you hardly any time at all. But questions like this or this, that are like straight up Algebra 1 questions technically, you need to slow down so you get it right, but not so much where you're taking 2 minutes to get the question right. Okay? It's a delicate balance, right? Oh, and then they throw some geometry on for fun. Woo! They want to know the angle of x degrees. They need to figure this guy out. Now, there's a bunch of ways that you can get there. And it's just a game of fiddling with your picture. Start filling some stuff out for me, guys. Like, for instance, if this is 106 degrees, how big is this angle right here? No calculator. 74. And then this, I see a triangle. And triangles add up to 180. Oh, man. All right, so I'm supposed to do this. But remember, I don't have a calculator, so I want to do this as quickly as I possibly can. Yeah. And then once I find this angle, then I'm supposed to find the supplement. Can I show you guys a secret? There's something called the remote angles theorem. And if you're in a triangle and you want to know an exterior angle outside of a triangle, if you just add up the two other angles in the triangle, that's the same measure. It's called the remote angles theorem. So all you really need to do for me is this, which I could totally do. Yeah. See, for me, my kids know this. I got real bad dyslexia. And I really screw up things like that, like adding or subtracting, which is scary that I'm a math teacher. All right, so good news. We just finished the gridded response section. I was blabbing to you a lot. We didn't really take that much time on it. Good news is we're at a good pace even with me blabbing. So now we go back to the front of the test. And you guys notice there were a couple stinky ones in there, but out of those 5 questions, I would say definitely 3 of the 5 were very easy math questions. They were Algebra 1 and geometry questions, 3 of the 5. So it's the end of the test, but it wasn't the worst set of questions for sure. All right, so we should start off the test now at number 1, now that we're back to the multiple choice part, and feel good that we can at least make educated guesses. But remember, the first couple should be real nice and easy. So number 1, which of the following is the equation of the line? Well, I get this. You guys remember this guy? Y equals mx plus b. So the slope is rise over run. I always start finding equations by finding their y-intercepts. So this is the y-axis. Tell me where, and the pictures are pretty beautifully drawn on the test. I know sometimes they get skewed from my copying, but the y-intercept is clearly at a positive 1. This would be a vertical line. This would be a horizontal line. This guy has a y-intercept at 0, so I think we're done. So how long did that question take you? Like if I wasn't blabbing at you, maybe 12 seconds? So they're not all going to take you a minute and a half. All right, number 2. The circle with center O has a circumference of 36. Uh-oh, is there a clue on circumference on your formula sheet in the front? There is! Look at that! So if you forgot about circumference, there it is. They do not require you to remember most things from geometry as far as formulas go, and surely not postulates. But diameter times pi, or 2 pi r, is circumference. So keep that in mind. What is the length of minor arc AC? Well, oh geez. Here's something kind of nice about standardized testing. When they give you a geometry picture, they work really hard generally to draw it to scale and proportion. So what does that box in the corner of that angle mean? 90-degree angle. And circles are how many degrees? 360. So a 90-degree angle would be a quarter of a circle. I think we're done. That arc would be a quarter of the whole circle. So what would be a quarter of 36? That'd be 9, yeah. So how you got that 9 doesn't really matter. Some kids are like, I don't know, looks like 9, and that's their way they answer it. That's not great, but you know, it's better than just flat out guessing. I mean, guys, if the whole circumference is 36, that arc's not going to be 36. Really, that was a vocab question. A lot of them are vocab questions. It's always, everything's a reading section, remember? All right, so what are the solutions? Oh, this is my bread and butter, quadratic equations without a calculator. Okay, so quadratic equations without a calculator. If I had a calculator, I'd probably just graph it because I'm lazy, but I don't. So now I have to solve it a different way, and believe it or not, most of your favorite way of solving quadratics is to factor. Now looking at my answer choices, I can tell that they're all going to be really nice and factorable because they all have integer solutions, so let's do this. But remember guys, no calculator, so make your life easy. Do you notice anything about this quadratic equation? Everything can be divided by 4. So now when I go and, oh boy, I see what they did there. Little brats. Okay, some of you don't know this yet, but the people who write these tests are math teachers. And we are horrible people. And when you factor, the most common mistake for children when factoring is to use the wrong sign. And then the second most common mistake for children is maybe they factored it right, but they forgot to solve them. So remember, if you're solving your factors, you're literally adding 3 over here and solving this linear equation. It's that take your turn equaling 0 business, right? So the solutions are x equals 3 and x equals -1, which is an answer, right? Yeah? Oh, is it B? Okay. Now, can y'all just take a moment and look at the other answer options? Do you feel like they're gunning for me? It's like they want me to fail. Like, I don't have good enough eyesight or dyslexia like problems to, oh geez, that was rude. All right, the answer is B. So just take a moment and go, did I do my signs right? Because that's a very common mistake. Okay, number 4. Which of the following is an example of a function whose graph on the xy coordinate plane has no x-intercepts? So they're talking about something that gets graphed, and it never crosses the x-axis. So your options are a linear function, also known as a line, whose rate of change is not 0. No, because any line that has the rate of change is not 0. No. A quadratic function with real zeros, a quadratic function with no real zeros, and a cubic polynomial with at least one real zero. Okay, so little test taking technique. If you have two answer choices that are really similar but opposites, one of them is right. So they're trying to test your vocabulary. If we don't have any real zeros, that means you have imaginary zeros. Remember, when you have imaginary zeros, you have a quadratic or some other polynomial that lives away from the x-axis. So it's that one. So again, technically, I mean, there's a theorem out there in algebra, but really it was a vocab question. All right, number 6. Which of the following is equivalent to the, sum of these expressions? So sum means to do what? Add. So just add them. A squared is the only squared term. I think I'm done. Do you see it? It's 2a squared. Yeah. Okay. No, it's not. Why do they do that to me? All right. Anyways, it's a. All right. I went to go add these together. I got all excited. That wasn't an a squared. Okay, so I learned I need bifocals. But look how easy that question is to mess up. Need bifocals. I need to slow down. All right. So believe it or not, guys, I know I've been yapping. We're still at a good pace. Like, remember, this whole test is supposed to be done in 25 minutes. And between my yapping, we've actually only actively tested for far less than 25 minutes. We're on good pace. Here we go. What is k if x equals 9? Well, okay. Why didn't they just do that themselves? Plug in 9. Now remember, you do not get a calculator here. In order to square both sides of the equation, you don't want to square things with the radical. You want to isolate the radical. So start by adding the 9 over. And then we're squaring both sides. So you do need to have a little bit of knowledge of, mathematical operations without a calculator. 9 squared is 81, yes. And then I think the only answer that works there is 79. Even if you can't subtract, I think you can figure it out. Now, what's another viable method for that question? 4 options. You could just plug them all in. There is an art to plugging and chugging, by the way. Like, for instance, if you plugged in a 1 and you're like, whoa, that's way off, then you would go to the most extreme version of 1, which would have been 79, okay? So keep that in mind. Oh, and let's end on a good word problem. Jackie and her work. All right, Jackie has 2 summer jobs. Now, show of hands. Who looks at this and goes, oh, great, word problems. I should skip it. Like, honest, I know that's your feelings. I know. You all grew up that way. Every time a word problem was assigned, you all skipped it. Math word problems on the SAT test are actually the ones that you should never skip because mathematically speaking, they're going to be the easiest questions on the test, okay? They're not going to be atrocious math problems. They're just reading questions. So Jackie has 2 jobs. She works as a tutor, which pays $12 an hour. Now, I wish they'd let me use a highlighter, but they're not going to. And then she works as a lifeguard, which pays $9.50. So that's her 2 jobs. She can work no more than 20 hours per week, but she wants to earn at least $220. That looks important. Okay, this is the most, and you guys always ignore this part of the question. I wish you wouldn't, because this is the most critical part. They tell you what x and y represent. So x is the number of tutoring hours, and y is the number of lifeguarding hours. So that has to match up with what they said, right? So $12 per hour for the tutoring job. So I'm looking for a 12 times x. Well, that's bummer. They're all of 12x. Okay. And then 950y. Okay, they all have 950y. And then I want to earn at least $220. So which inequality am I looking for? Be careful. At least means 220 or bigger. So I want to be greater than or equal to 220. So not you, not you. It's one of these 2. Let's keep reading. And then I can work, or she can work, whoops, no more than 20 hours. No more than 20 hours. So it has to be 20 hours or under. So we're looking for less than or equal to 20 hours. It is choice C. Man, That was, for a dyslexic lady, that's a rough go. If you show up today after school, I'm just going to keep on working through this test. And then eventually I'll move on to test 7, and I have other things I can copy if we need to.